This week on Barely Homesteading, installing a pre-hung door. So with the winter months, we're doing more indoor projects because of the snow and the cold, trying to get this room down in our basement finished off, and so we need to get a door installed to close off the room from our storage area. So that's what we're going to talk about this week, is installing a pre-hung door. So when I was doing the installation of this door, unfortunately I had the camera set to photo instead of video, and so we lost the first couple of videos of installing the door. So I just want to go through a couple of things that would have been in those original videos. So when installing a pre-hung door, we're always going to start on the hinge side of the door. We're going to put the door into the rough opening, and we want that rough opening to give us a gap between the outer surfaces of the jab and the rough opening of, about quarter to half an inch, ideally. We're then going to fill that gap between the jab and the frame with some shims. Now these shims are tapered, so that if you take two shims and put that taper opposite each other, you get two parallel surfaces that as you slide the shims together, those parallel surfaces get thicker and thicker and thicker. And so this gives you these shims give you a very nice way of going from a very thin gap to what can be quite a thick gap, and take that gap out in increments. So as I said, we're going to start with the jab on the hinge side. Going to take and we're going to put shims behind the hinges between that rough opening and the jab, and we're going to adjust the thickness of those shims to give us the jab plumb, so it's perpendicular to the ground. In other words, it's parallel to gravity. You want to make sure that you are checking that jab in both directions, so in this direction and in this direction, so that when the door is open, it doesn't want to swing on its own. And you'll notice here that we've got this nice and plumb because the door doesn't want to open on its own. It's staying where it is. And so we start in the upper corner. Going to start, as I said, behind the hinge. We're going to adjust that thickness. Going to put a nail through the shims, or through the jab, through the shims, and into the stud of the rough opening. Then you're going to move down, and you're going to do the same thing, all the while checking level, checking that plumb, to make sure that we've got that level in both directions. You also want to make sure that the jab is flush with the drywall, so that when you're installing your trim, flush to just a little bit out, so that when you're installing your trim, the trim sits on there properly. Once you've got the hinge side jab done, we're going to move to the top. We're doing the same thing, except with the top, what you're really focused on is the gap between the top of the door and the top of the door jab. You want to make sure that that gap is even. And what we shoot for is a gap of about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch. And so you're going to be shimming underneath or on top of the jab and beneath the rough opening to get that consistent gap between the top of the door and that top of the casing of the door. All right, with the top in, now ready to do the side where the latch is. And again, we're going to be shimming this based upon the gap between the door and jab. And so that's how we're going to do it. If you have it in or have it away from the frame, the rough frame too much, the gap's too small and the door won't open smooth. Have it too far away and then you get big drafts. So again, we're going to be shimming this so that that gap is between 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch all the way down the length. All right, so on this side, the rough opening is not square. It is actually tilted this way. So we're actually going to use the shims so that I'm building up this side to try to even that out so that this wants to sit flush on the shims to even out that uneven gap. All right, so we've got everything rough nailed with the nail gun. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put in some longer and, as I said, larger finish nails to strengthen this up. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to put some screws through the hinges into the framing so that the door doesn't want to sag over time. All right, so here is the length of the screw that I've taken out of the hinge. Here's the length of the screw I'm putting in. What you want to do is you want to screw long enough that's going to go through the frame and into the 2x4s of the wall so that it holds this sturdy during operation so it doesn't sag. Now, there's two ways to do this. One is you can just replace one of the screws in the hinge with the longer screw. You can do that as long as the screws match, right? I've got a silver screw, I'm replacing with a silver screw. If they don't match, what you can do is you can take all 3 screws out and underneath the hinge put in your non-matching screw and then replace the hinge with the original screws that match your hinge. Either one works. Now, you're going to want to come in with a nail set and set those heads of the finish nails below the surface before you come in and finish the door with paint or stain or whatever you're doing. If you're going to stain your door, then you're going to want to set those and then use some wood putty before you stain. If you paint, just put some filler in there, and then you can paint over that after it's dry, and you may want to sand it just to get it nice and flush before you paint. But now that we got the door set, we can come in and trim off all of these shims so that they're not sticking out. One way to do that is to just come in with your utility knife and score it and then snap it off. All right, all done. So this is a fairly easy job, although with some experience it does go faster. You don't need a lot of specialized tools. Really all you need is a hammer, some nails, a screwdriver, some replacement screws for the hinges, and a level and a utility knife or saw to cut off the shims. There really is no specialized tooling needed for this. So now that we've got the door hung, we can finish off the rest of this room and start to utilize this space. And so next week we'll talk about finishing off this room. So until then, this is Lumberjack with Barely Homesteading, saying use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.